Welcome back. You're watching the special discussion as we assess the 100-day performance of the Modi administration. Nenalal Kidwai, I think there's absolute consensus on the fact that one of the biggest achievements of this government in the first 100 days has been its attempt to overhaul the governance structures. Let's address the policy paralysis part of it first. The bureaucracy has been given a mandate, the do's and don'ts, the 10 commandments. The bureaucracy has been told, take the decisions, the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister will support you. We've done away with this culture of empowered group of ministers and group of ministers. So decision-making has now, in a sense, been centralized as well, but at least there is faster decision-making. Would you say that that has been perhaps the biggest confidence booster, so to speak?
I absolutely think so. And I think, Shereen, you can add to that list the fact that there's a commitment to the e-governance type of models. We've seen what the Environment Ministry announced, which is a lot more transparency than we've seen in the past, and the ability to therefore track your application of the e-environment process. And I think this is an indication of things to come. I'd also like to add to the list of things that we've talked about, which I do think is big bang and transformational, and which did not get touched on earlier on your show, and that is on water and sanitation. I think the announcement made by the Prime Minister is historic in terms of commitment to toilets. Just something as simple but as critical as that. And if you look at the fact that 70% of health costs in the country, I believe, are from waterborne disease, think of how we can change the health of the nation through public health and cost therein by just looking at a very critical area of access to drinking water and proper sanitation. And to have these announcements made on Independence Day, which of course is not long ago, is, I think, historic. And I think we should, I was just reading somewhere that countries like Singapore and later Indonesia, Thailand, did what they have achieved today in terms of some of these parameters happened because there was sponsorship and leadership at the highest level. In Singapore, it took an announcement, and of course it is a city-state, so possibly easier, and thereafter, of course, the implementation, which is going to be key for us as well. But to have a rallying point now, where right off that the private sector has made commitments, 100 crores each from big companies in support of this, and if we can create this movement as the big mover forward in a PPP framework, as in a public partnership with private sector sort of approach, I think it is going to be one of the big achievements of this government. So how it's implemented is what we wait to see. But it is just such an important and transformational.
I completely agree with you. I think the emphasis on water and sanitation has been absolutely great on the part of the Prime Minister. But Rajiv Kumar, since we are talking about governance, the effort to bring in e-governance, the effort to move everything onto an e-biz platform by March 2015 to improve or enhance the ease of doing business, which has been abysmal as far as, our manufacturing sector, for instance, is concerned. The slogan of Make in India, Sell Everywhere, this business of trying to review and overhaul obsolete, archaic laws. A committee has now been set up to look at laws that were identified under the Vajpayee administration, but nothing ever got done about repealing them or amending them. Do you think that this has been, and this is going to be the single biggest transformational change that this administration can bring about if they do in fact go about bringing this to the winter session of Parliament, and that is what the committee has been mandated to do?
Well, that will just be great. I mean, greater transparency, simplicity of the procedure, combining lots of, returns, getting into a process of self-certification and doing away with Inspector Raj, all of that, which is very well known but waiting to be implemented. If the government can move with alacrity on that, that will be the real test, and that will be really a big, big, big win in improving the business environment. But there are a couple of other issues, Shereen, that I just wanted to raise. One, I think a very big thing that the Prime Minister has done, which has gone, which doesn't seem like it, is to try and remove this distinction between the ruler and the ruled. And as a result of that, becoming a part of them and therefore being able to hold up this mirror to our society and point to our warts and say that, look, this is all that we have. So,
the concept of the Pradhan Sevak.
Yourself, and why should you depend upon the Pradhan Sevak? It sounds like a cliche, but in doing so, what he's done is that he's turned it on its head and said, it's your responsibility as much as mine to bring about a social transformation. And that, Shereen, to make development into a social revolution, into a social process, is a very big change in India that he's brought about. I think that's a very big one. The second one that I wanted to bring out here is that what he has done by scrapping the Planning Commission is again changing the whole mindset, saying that, look, we have moved on from a centrally planned, closed economy into an Indian economy, which is going to look for innovative ideas to become globally competitive, and which will be open, which will remain open, and be integrated with a globalized economy. So that's the very big one. And those two big changes, I think, are going to have a long-term effect and a kind of a structural, systematic effect. The third one is his call against corruption, and some actions against that which have already been taken. Again, it was threatening to become systemic. It was threatening to eat into the entrails of our system. I think the call from the top to say that no more and there is zero tolerance, I think will be salutary and have a salutary effect. One disappointment, though, which is this very touching faith in the existing bureaucratic system and not being able to tap. And if he's doing that, he's not telling us. Maybe he's doing it in private. Not being able to tap into the existing talent within India and outside to come up with innovative solutions. And let me just give you one example.
That's what the new Planning Commission may look like.
Inflation.
I'll come to that in just a bit. But Ashok Wadhwa, I want to pick up on the point that Rajiv Kumar was making. And, this getting out of this mindset of we need to have a 5-year plan. We need to allocate budgets as per a 5-year plan. I mean, those days are over. We live in an integrated world. We live in an integrated economy. Things are dynamic. Things change. And the problem that India and the Indian economy has always suffered from is this delivery deficit or the execution deficit. Do you believe that we're now going to be closer to be able to bridging that deficit because of this substantial mindset change?
Well, as Rajiv rightly said, it needed a bold man, and I'm glad he has, eliminated the concept of Planning Commission. I think, I don't know whether it was the budget of 2013 or 2012, but we had a debate on your television that India doesn't need a Planning Commission. India really needs an implementation commission. We are brilliant visionaries. We come up with brilliant plans. We come up with, outstanding announcements. The unfortunate problem is that there is no accountability to implementing on those announcements. And therefore, I'm glad that old, outdated system of Planning Commission is done away with and hopefully will be replaced with a new, vibrant, younger commission that holds itself more accountable to delivery versus just planning. The only concern I would have, Shereen, is that if nothing else, Planning Commission was the only body in India that held itself responsible for a 5-year plan. We know the constraints of annual budget. We know the desire to achieve lowest fiscal deficit. And we know that our finance minister, year after year, are subjected to immense pressure to try and make a budget work. And therefore,
but Ashok, that plan wasn't sacrosanct. I mean, you were revising downwards, target after target. Let's just look at the power sector. How many times did they revise the power sector outlay target downwards?
And I agree with you. That's the point I was making, that I'm glad that, he's actually eliminated Planning Commission. We need to have a more accountable implementation body. All that I was trying to say was that by eliminating this, if he's not able to quickly create somebody, a body, which apart from being accountable and being responsible for implementation, has a longer-term vision and responsibility to create and then implement in that longer-term vision, then you could be in a worse off position than you were with the Planning Commission. Because as I said, at least the Planning Commission had the responsibility and took it upon itself. They couldn't deliver on it, and that was the weakness, honestly.
But Ashok, the larger point that I was trying to make is that are investors now pricing in this execution deficit that India always suffered from? Are people now beginning to price in that?
Right now, the investors are pricing in the fact that, there is euphoria, that there is positive sentiment, that Mr. Modi will do what it takes, that his leadership qualities demonstrated over the last 10 years in Gujarat will be reflected in his actions in the country, and therefore there is a huge amount of a premium, I would argue, at the fact that we have a man who will implement what he has said. Should that not happen, I would argue that there would be serious amount of disappointment, and the premium that people have built in for that execution will quickly reflect itself on a discount the other way around.
Okay. Satya Poddar, you talked about the subtlety with which this government is approaching tax reform. Now, what is it that you would like to see in the next 100 days ahead of the budget?
I think my personal views about what should be done haven't really changed. The thing to debate and discuss is how to bring about that change.
Yeah.
So, for example, GAR, it has to be gutted. But gutted doesn't mean that it has to be completely abolished, gotten rid of. Perhaps you need a safer, saner version of GAR, reflecting the recommendations that the Shom Committee made about how...
But is that the sense that you get? Because on GAR, it's been a sort of, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it approach that this government has taken.
I think you can't fault the government, because after all, there is a long history of 2 to 3 years of debate and research within the department. And for some reason, they came out with a version of GAR. He is still listening to the same officials. There's no new advisory group advising them. And take the example of even retrospective changes. You have the president who crafted the retrospective changes. Now, somebody must be wondering, how can you send a legislation...
The legislation to the president who actually brought that in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's also there may well be people in the public who thinks it was a good thing to bring in the retrospective changes. My views and professional views across the country are retrospective changes cannot be implemented, cannot be brought about. But how do you undo the damage that has been done
in the past?
And that's where I think, take the example of GST. You identified these 3 things as the key areas of disappointment. On the GST, Minister has said very categorically in all the private meetings that his most important deliverable Prime Minister is expecting from him before the end of this calendar year is a constitutional amendment bill for the GST. But how can you implement it without the state's support of some nature?
Yeah.
And he is following a very measured approach of bringing about consensus. First of all, he's basically taking the UP agenda, and that's the agenda he went back to the states with. States have toughened their stance. Not only they are not happy with what was presented to them, but they have gone the opposite extreme of even making more demands, which sounds so insane.
Yeah, so GST, I'm skeptical whether we are going to see the constitutional bill being moved in the winter session, but we're out of time. So that, Vaidarajan, let me end by asking you, and it's an interesting piece written by Milind Deora, where he talks about how social belligerence could be the undoing as far as this government is concerned. Final comments from you before I let you go.
Yeah, everybody liked it when the Prime Minister from the Red Fort said that there should be a 10-year moratorium on communal, people advocating communalism. But when you have people within his own party in Uttar Pradesh and within the Sangh Parivar to which he belongs, openly spreading hate under the guise of so-called love jihad, one pretext or the other, and the Prime Minister remains silent in the face of that. I think this is his single biggest failing, quite frankly. He needs to recognize that social peace, in the absence of social peace, none of the economic promises that he's made will ever be implemented. And I think it's essential that the Prime Minister not forget this simple fact, and that when people in his own party say god-awful things, provocative things, incite hatred or violence, he needs to be out there he needs to speak openly, condemn them, and reassure the people of India that he will not tolerate this and not allow this to happen. I think unless he does that, there will always be this question mark on the kind of Prime Minister that he's going to be.
Well, there is no question mark about the 100-day performance. Our panelists agree with the findings of our poll. The respondents that we polled, 90% believe that this has been an above-average performance for the Modi administration in the first 100 days. And that's what we're hearing from all our special guests here. Of course, the road ahead is long and a lot more needs to be done. But this government has gotten off to a good start. That is the view that's coming in. Siddharth Varadarajan, Ashok Vadva, Rajiv Kumar, Nainalal Kidwai, Satyapol Dar, appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 special discussion.